So my presentation is about establishing the basics, and I think that establishing the basics for an individual student means learning how to effectively teach him. So we'll devote second half of my presentation on specific teaching strategies for language skills, for conversation skills, for interactions with peers, and some other examples. But I would like to concentrate on the first half on establishing the basics on regarding political decisions, on establishing the basics for individual students and families regarding changes in the community. So on how we can put a solid basis in our society that is scientifically proven so that we make people's life better. So I will start with some definitions quickly, because after today's presentations, Mickey's presentation and other colleagues' presentations, Carl's and Mary Rose's, I think we've understood what ABA is, so we'll go quickly through the definitions. So applied behavior analysis is the branch of the science of behavior analysis that focuses on significant social behavior. So behavior analysts, we focus on how to teach to children new behaviors, on how to increase existing ones, on how to decrease inappropriate behaviors, on how to maintain them, and on how to generalize appropriate behaviors. So we use specific evaluation methods so that we can monitor progress and we can know if what we're doing works or not. So if it doesn't, we modify it, and if it does work, we keep going with it. And apart from that, we also conduct research. So we take data continuously, and if we find a new technique that, of course, comes from the science of behavior analysis, but it's a new technique, then we let the entire community know so that other children can benefit from this same strategy. So that is ABA. And now regarding pervasive developmental disorders like autism, when we get a diagnosis of ASD or PDT, when we get a diagnosis for a child, we know that this specific student has impairments in social skills, in communication skills, and that he is probably showing some repetitive behaviors or some stereotypes, as we call them, stereotypies. So these are the three core areas in students with autism, the three core areas that we have to work on. And about the relation between autism and ABA, I think this relation is quite clear. So ABA is the intervention of choice for children with autism, and it is the intervention of choice not because I am a behavior analyst. I think that I became a behavior analyst when I saw that it's working, so I think it was the way around. But it is the intervention of choice because there have been at least 40 or 50 or maybe 60 years of research proving that it's effective. So I've put here for you just two statements coming from different institutions that clearly get this point across. So the first one is the effectiveness of ABA-based intervention in ASD has been well documented through 5 decades of research by using single subject methodology and in controlled studies of comprehensive early intensive behavior intervention programs in university and community settings. Children who receive early intensive behavioral treatment have been shown to make substantial, sustained gains in IQ, language, academic performance, and adaptive behavior, as well as some measures of social behavior, and their outcomes have been significantly better than those of children in control groups. This was published by the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2007. I've picked up a second statement, but as I said before, there are plenty of them. So this speaks about 30 years of research. This was published in 1999, so we'll be talking about 40 now. So 30 years of research demonstrated the efficacy of applied behavioral methods in reducing inappropriate behavior and in increasing communication, learning, and appropriate social behavior. So knowing that ABA is the applied branch of a science, which is the intervention of choice for children with ASD, I think that now we have to think of what kind of changes we have to make in our society in our educational settings so that children with autism can finally benefit of them on a wide range, I would say all of them, so the entire community. So I've put here a scheme, like a figure. So I think that we have to analyze 3 different levels. So first we've got the micro level, and this is the individual students. It refers to individual families, individual students with autism, and individual professionals like us that we're here today. So when we make changes to this level, we have professionals that get training, children that improve their lives, families that have a better quality of life, but on an individual basis. Then we've got the second level of analysis, and that's the meso level. So here we make changes for the entire community, for the entire neighborhood. We could also be talking about an entire country in a globalized world. And then the top of the pyramid is the macro level. So here we've got changes that really affect the entire country or the European Union or our society or our civilization, if we're talking about how we want to ethically address people that have difficulties, how we want to address these difficulties in an ethical way, and what we want our civilization and our society to be offering to students with difficulties. So I will give some examples. So first of all, I think that we can achieve changes in these 3 levels through individual decisions, like our decision of coming here today and learning some new things about how we can be more effective in teaching. Community decisions, like a parents' association that makes a decision to offer an outdoor activity for a group of children with ASD so that they can increase their social interactions, and political decisions. So political decisions are on the top of the pyramid, but they are obviously influenced by individual decisions and by community decisions. So I will give some examples of real changes that have been achieved in all the 3 levels. So on the macro level, the French government decided to fund some ABA schools across the country. So this is a change that affects the entire country and children living across all France. The foundation of the European Association for Behaviour Analysis, this was also a change on the top of the pyramid because it affected hundreds of professionals in the entire Europe, and it offered training opportunities, like, for example, conference in several European countries. Then we've got some changes in the meso level, like, for example, a master's degree in ABA and autism in a university could affect the entire community and all the neighbors living around the community. And of course, nowadays, with mobilization, international students traveling so much, it could affect not just the community where the university is based, but an entire country or different neighbor countries. And then some changes in the micro level would be having individual students progressing very much, and, for example, on language skills, and being able to attend a mainstream school, or having individual families' quality of life being improved, or having individual students and professionals like us developing and learning and improving their teaching techniques. So I will now speak about some specific changes that go across the 3 levels in different European countries, starting from my home country. So in Greece, for example, these are just some examples, are real changes, but they're not the only ones, just some of them. So there has been a lot of research ongoing with master students and with undergraduate students in Pantheon University in Athens, conducted by Professor Robert Mellon. So there's been an increase in Greece in the number of professionals that have been trained in ABA and on how to effectively address the needs of children with ASD. In 2007, a Greek English glossary of behavior analytic terms was produced in Greece for professionals and parents that want to apply methods coming from ABA and need to understand those scientific terms that are in English and in Greek, obviously. So in 2009, the first board-certified behavior analysts in Greece appeared, and nowadays we have 2. And some months ago, the Hellenic Association for Behaviour Analysis had its foundation meeting. Talking about Germany, in 2011, the German Association for Behaviour Analysis was founded. The German-English Glossary of Behaviour Analytic Terms is expected to be published in 2013. There has been a big increase in specialized professionals in Germany, and there are now 8 CBAs, which is obviously not enough for a big country, just 8 trained professionals, but it's better than none some years ago. And there's also been an increase in training events and in printed materials like books or training manuals for parents and teachers. In Spain, there has been some more activity in the last year. So in 2004, the Spanish Association for Behavior Analysis was founded. And in 2007, 2008, the master's degree in ABA and autism intervention started. So on the first year, 15 in-class students attended this master's. And nowadays, there are more than 50 online students per year. So students in Spain come from Spain, Portugal, France, the USA, and different Latin American countries, which means that there has been an important increase in the number of trained professionals that work with children with autism in Spain and some other countries. So there's also been an increase in the number of board-certified behavior analysts in Spain, an increase in the number of schools that have been familiar with ABA, because obviously our students, our kids go to school afterwards when they have the necessary skills, so schools become familiar with ABA. And there have been 2 very important conferences held in Spain in the last years. The first one was the European Conference in Behavior Analysis in 2008, and the second one was the International Conference in Behavior Analysis in 2012. So we'll now move on to France. So Autism Europe is an international association whose main aim is to advance the rights of persons with autism and their families and to help them improve their quality of life. The association maintains links among more than 80 member associations of parents of persons with autism in 30 European countries, including 20 member states of the European Union, governments, and European and international institutions. So Autism Europe has played a key role in raising public awareness on autism and in influence European decision makers on all issues related to autism. So in 2004, Autism Europe won at the European Council against the French government for not meeting children's rights. In 2006, a different association called Lea for Sami also won against the French government for discriminating children with autism. In 2007, parents' associations achieved that the National Ethical Consultation Committee published a report stating that the lack of an early diagnosis, of access to education, socialization, and to early and individualized treatment results in this discapacity to the child, losing possibilities, which constitutes abuse by defects. This is translated by friends. So after these 3 or 4 events, very important ones, but they were not the only ones, I've just put here the most important. In 2008, the French government decided to fund 10 ABA centers. So in 2010, the government, the Ministry of Health, published for the first time an official definition on pervasive developmental disorders, or ASD, and the first diagnostic and evaluation reports. So in 2009-2010, these 10 ABA-funded centers started running in France, in Paris, in Toulouse, in Lille, in different cities. And some months ago, an official publication of a modified report on recommended and not recommended treatments came out, again from the High Authority of Health, which is the Ministry of Health. So in the report on recommended and non-recommended treatments, which means non-scientific ones, not evidence-based ones, behavior analytic interventions with specific characteristics, like, for example, with a specific onset age are recommended. Psychoanalytic interventions, which were the main interventions in France until that time, are discouraged, and other interventions like floor time or neurofunctional organization are explicitly not recommended. In the last 2 or 3 years, professional associations have been founded, different professional associations, and they have been made affiliated chapters of the international associations, like the International ABA Association or the Behaviour Analysis Certification Board. So I think that these changes in France have gone up to 3 levels. So individual decisions of parents wanting the most effective educational treatments for their children, available for their children, have been able to influence the entire community. And then several communities have been able to get politicians make the correct decisions for these children. And after 50 or 60 years of research, they have eventually got just 10 ABA centers, but I think that that's a very good start. So these 10 ABA centers will be continuously assessed, and in 5 years' time, the government will decide if they will continue funding and increase funding for even more centers in France and the whole country. So I think that that's a very, very important decision for its individual child that is getting the appropriate evidence-based treatment finally. And of course, for all the professionals that are getting training and all the teachers that finally are getting support. And it also facilitates collaboration between schools and ABA providers and private consultants and speech and language pathologists, and it gets the entire community to be happy because results are being significant for the children, and at the same time it allows for personal development, not just for the children, but also for the professionals. So these are some very positive changes, but of course now positive things have just started happening. So there are many future goals. Some formal criteria for quality assessment of treatment should also be published, and I think that would be necessary for every country, not just France, of course. As a result of private practice, collaboration between private ABA providers and public institutions, our institutions being governed by the state, like public schools, is often difficult. For example, children that have received individualized ABA interventions and have acquired the necessary skills to be included in mainstream schools are often excluded just because they have got ABA intervention. So I think that, of course, the collaboration can be greatly improved. There is still a complete lack of knowledge on what ABA is, and I think that a lot of misconceptions are maintained. So there is a lot of work to be done in this area, and more training should be available on the science of ABA and specifically related to autism. Private consultants or BCBAs or professionals trained in ABA are very few, so sometimes families have to wait for 1 year, for example, and given the importance of early intervention, this can be devastating for a child, so obviously you have to increase the number of trained professionals. Some of the times families have to move to a different city to get services, so there is a huge need for more trained professionals in every single country. There is still a lack of political decisions endorsing scientific practice for children with autism, and this results in absolute lack of funding in many countries. So I won't speak about the recession and its results on individual families in Greece, but you can imagine them, or about the effects of the recession in non-governmental organizations in Spain because of a lack of funding. I will just say generally that the lack of funding means that a family that can afford ABA treatment pays for it and the child progresses, but the families that cannot afford it do not get it. And I think that this is clearly an abuse by neglect, or I think that's an abuse. I think that this is not treating children as equal. So I think that treatment should be available to any child needing it, and funding should be free, of course. So I think that the progress that has been made in France in the last 2 years is a very positive start for a lot of European countries that for different parents associations and professional associations that are trying to find their way towards gaining funding. Another future goal would be getting an early diagnosis, because this is very important for the treatment outcomes, and having officially published information on recommended treatments being delivered to parents when they get diagnosed, I think would also be very, very important, so that time is not lost looking online for what to do. Instead, parents know from professionals, being physicians, for example, on which are the interventions of choice, and they can directly start them. So going to the nicer part about individual students with children with autism. So what does starting an ABA program mean? Well, first of all, we would use a behavioral assessment tool. Then we would choose some target behaviors in different developmental areas. Then we would train parents and therapists to effectively deliver teaching on these specific behaviors or specific educational goals. We would at the same time manage behavioral problems, and we would monitor progress to see if what we're doing is being effective for this specific child. And we would then schedule periodical supervisions, for example, once a week or once a month, to monitor progress and give feedback to therapists and parents. So regarding assessment, I've here included one behavioral instrument, and this is the VIBI map. So the advantage is it follows typical development, so it tells us what a typically developing peer would do at the same age, so what we have to be targeting. It is comprehensive, so it includes several developmental areas. It provides a detailed explanation of each specific goal and which are the prerequisites that we have to teach before going up to more advanced skills. It includes an assessment of learning barriers, so that we can also address obstacles that interfere with learning, and it includes a guidance on how to develop an individualized educational program. So I've put here an example. So that's what the level 1 of this instrument would look like. So we would first assess the area that's called manding, and this means being able to make requests. So say, Mom, I want a cookie, or I want to go to the park, so this is making requests. The second area is tacting, and this means making comments, like, oh, that's an airplane, or something like, I like your jacket, making comments on things that we see, things that we observe. Third area is listener behavior, which means understanding what we hear and acting upon what somebody told us. So an example of the first area would be, is the child able to omit one word or sign or use pegs? If the child is able to use at least one word, we would then color in this small box. An example of the second column would be, is the child able to make one comment without any prompt? Just say one word as a comment. If the child can't do that, we would color this second box. Another example, can the child attend to a speaker's voice by orienting toward the speaker at least 5 times in half an hour? If the child is able to do that, we would color this box. So this first level is built on typically developing children from 0 to 12 months. So this is exactly what typically developing children are able to do, and it is very, very specifically divided into prerequisite skills, and the order it goes from downwards upwards means that the things that are at the bottom are the skills we have to teach first, and then we have to build on these skills, the more complex ones. And then after this level 1, we've got level 2 and level 3. So this is a very useful tool. I've got some more examples here. So fourth column is visual perception. Is the child able to attend to a toy or a book for 30 seconds? Color that in if the child is able. So after we've done this assessment, it takes quite a lot of hours, but it's very useful. Then we know which are the skills that are lacking, and we just start teaching them. So for example, the echoic column, this one, this box here is the child able to repeat at least 2 sounds? So it's very, very specific. So after we've done the assessment and we know exactly what the child is able to do, we have to design the individualized educational program, the IP. So how to choose targets? Some general guidelines here. So we have to choose, first of all, prerequisites before we start teaching more advanced skills. We have to choose skills that facilitate wide and collateral improvements. So for example, teaching to a child to eat a variety of foods, as we heard this morning from our colleague, will not only improve the child's health, but it will also allow him to go to restaurants with his family, to go to daily excursions with his peers, to eat in the school's restaurant with other children. So it will produce wide improvements. Teaching a child to read, as Carl told us, will give to the child access not only to being able to decode some symbols that we call letters and say sound for them. It will also allow the child to read signs, to go to the supermarket and be able to understand what the products say. The child will later on be able to read fairy tales or read a story and enjoy it, and many more things. So teaching to a child to read would produce collateral improvements. The targets that we choose have to be functional for the entire family and the setting. So teaching to a student that lives in a village, for example, to use public transport may not be as urgent as teaching him to cross the road. So we have to pick up skills that are functional for the child's family and for the setting where he lives. The skills have to be age appropriate. So we can teach play skills to a 3-year-old child, like playing with a car, but obviously leisure skills to a teenager would look very different from playing with a car. Functional language should be a priority because children that know how to communicate their needs, they can have their needs met by letting their caregivers know what they need, what they want. And language skills are the basis for more advanced skills like advanced social skills. So functional language skills are the basis for appropriate social interactions. So any ABA program that wants to be successful should address functional language skills. Of course, language skills leads to more advanced skills like problem solving. So this is a very important area. Then we have to increase the probability of successful interactions. We have to assess problem behaviors and their effects on learning and everyday life, and intervene when necessary. So for example, vocal stereotypy of a 3-year-old child may not bother other family members, but thinking of its possible interference with learning and group instruction when this child will be at school would probably lead us to want to address this problem behavior early enough. And finally, we would like to balance skills across different developmental areas, because a uniform progress will increase the probability of meaningful and successive interactions with peers. So a child that has a balanced level in all developmental areas, his level would more or less correspond with a peer's level. So he would be able to interact with peers in a variety of different settings, like in play, during school activities, during conversations, etc. So that's all.